Hi, my name is Crystal King, and I will be discussing everything to do with autism. So, autism can be defined as a broad range of conditions characterized by social skills, repetitive behaviors, speech and nonverbal communication, as well as by unique strengths and differences. It's been discovered that we now know that there's not one autism but many types, most caused by a combination of genetic and environmental influences. A little background into the syndrome disorder is that it was first recognized in the early 1900s. Some of the noticeable characteristics was that they were finding that children were extremely withdrawn and self-absorbed, so not really showing off any social skills, which is usually normal for children at that age. By the 1940s, Asperger's was first coined because they noticed a set of boys who were exhibiting social cues, were having trouble with exhibiting social cues, and obsessive behavior, but encompassing highly intelligent capabilities. There was much debate, but eventually it was proven that autism was a genetic and biological impairment from brain development. For a while, people thought that maybe it had to do with vaccines or the way a mother was taking care of their children and it was causing these effects, but that has since been debunked. Some ways to give hope to parents with their children is they learned that intense behavior therapy was helping to help them exist in regular day society. By the early 1990s, autism was added into the special education list, which would then lead to them having to deal with interventions and classified and getting the special help from a variety of school administrators and school psychologists and school counselors, as well as teachers becoming more involved. Asperger's would later be added into the DSM, expanding the umbrella term that is rooted in the autism syndrome. And because they've been able to further their research, cases have grown from roughly 1 out of 150 kids are diagnosed, but now it's increased by a lot to 1 in 110. In more recent discovery in 2013, Asperger's syndrome was no longer classified in its own category, but it will fall under the spectrum or the DSM-5 umbrella for autism, which is just a classification of impairment in social skills, like I said earlier, interactions, obsessive, and constrained behavior. Autism has made major strides in the research field in the last 100 plus years or so, but there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be discovered to aid in students in education programs and school settings and transitioning them into higher education or just everyday life when it comes to getting occupation. Defining features that can be noticed early on, and some ways to catch symptoms is as early as 6 months, but the more prominent features is they avoid eye contact and prefer to be alone. They struggle with understanding other people's feelings, so there's a lack of empathy. They remain nonverbal or have delayed language development. They can repeat words or phrases over and over again, which is classified as a word called ochalaia. They get upset by major changes in their routine or surroundings, has highly restricted interest, so they very much stick to what they know once they've latched onto whatever. They perform repetitive behaviors such as flapping, rocking, or spinning, and has unusual and often intense reactions to sounds, smells, tastes, textures, light, and or colors. When looking at the incidences in the field of autism, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, also known as CDC, estimates that autism prevalence as 1 in 68 children in the United States. This includes 1 in 42 boys and 1 in 189 girls. So it's more prominent to find autism in boys compared to girls. An estimated 50,000 teens with autism become adults and lose school-based autism services each year. Around 1/3 of people with autism remain nonverbal. Around 1/3 of people with autism have an intellectual disability. And certain medical and mental health issues frequently accompany autism. They include gastrointestinal disorders, seizures, sleep disturbances, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD, anxiety, and phobias. Ways that autism has manifested in the education realm is they've had a hand in IEPs with individualized educational programs. In the school, there's going to be lots of meetings once a child is classified, so their IEPs are usually pushed through into or put in the hands of a school psychologist and a special education teacher so that they can remain in an inclusive environment. So staying in a mainstream school, but just leaving the classroom to get the extra help that they need, whether it's one-on-one or just a few other students with them. A lot of times in schools, because it's mostly involved with communication and social skills, because they do lack that cognitive ability, they're often misunderstood by their peers, resulting in bullying and emotional distress. They exhibit challenging behavior, so often rigid, which can sometimes get in the way when in a class the main goal is to get everyone on the same page and go through the lesson plan of the day. A lot of times they can fall between the cracks if they're not properly diagnosed and labeled as troublesome, like I said earlier, challenging behavior, and just misunderstood by many people in a school setting. And because of these emotional distress, a lot of times students with autism can have a lot of absences in their school. But this is in no way a reflection of their capabilities. Sometimes it just takes a different setting or an educational plan that will aid to how they just learn differently. Strategies to support and assist in children with autism is to have the proper training for staff in schools. So being well aware of the syndrome disorder and the effects it has on the kids, and being a better aid in how to help them rather than seeing them as a problem. It could just be a change in the way a teacher teaches their material. There should be a peer awareness education programs to help other students who don't have a learning disability to understand what autism is in order to cut back on things like bullying and leaving kids isolated in school. There definitely needs to be school environment modifications, flexibility, where most schools prefer to keep things in a status quo, not really deviating from it. Offering a positive atmosphere for autism acceptance, effective parent involvement, so having parents and administration all on the same page, but children do go home, so having their parents on the same page is also important. Staff and peer support for the children, a flexible curriculum like I mentioned earlier. And in a study I read, they created this UDL, which is Universal Design of Learning, which is a more pedagogical approach to teaching the children, which offers ways to really blend in with how they're able to attain information, and not a one-size-fits-all student, because they do learn and sometimes they have high intelligence capabilities, but it's just the way the material is relayed to them that helps. Strategies as well as applied behavioral analysis, which is teaching them ways to coexist in society. despite their lack of social skills or social cues and eye contact, which people who don't have disabilities don't even think twice of, where this is something that they have to work on. Small group interventions, like I mentioned earlier, and also learning to encourage and recognize and appreciate their uniqueness, not seeing them as less than, but as different. So yeah, that's my video on autism, and I hope you guys learned ways that in school counseling fields or student affairs, you're able to aid to students with autism. Thank you.